pray that you will reach up and accept this as the Lord's word to you. On live television in October 2024, a convicted sexual offender
made shocking
revealed startling allegations regarding pastort.d, Jake Jakes. G claimed that when Jake attempted to kiss him in the 1980s, his attorney demanded $6 million in exchange for his silence. Jake filed a lawsuit, calling it extortion. Then, things became worse. A few weeks later, Jake passed out during a sermon and almost passed away from a severe heart attack. According to doctors, it might have been brought on by the scandal's stress. He is now leaving his $400 million business. Was his heart the only reason for his collapse? On June 9, 1957, Thomas Dexter Jakes was born in South Charleston, West Virginia. African-American families found life particularly challenging during this time due to racial divisions and economic hardships. His mother, Odette, was an educator, and his father, Ernest Jakes Sr., had a janitorial company. Thomas was the youngest of 3 children they raised together. Black families had few possibilities and frequently had little money. Discrimination was a daily occurrence in the area, which was still reeling from the effects of segregation. Thomas learned the importance of endurance and hard effort from his upbringing in this setting. His ministry was eventually built on the principles he gained growing up in a home where surviving was never easy. He frequently attributed his empathy and fortitude to those formative years. Thomas was drawn to preaching even as a young child. He was referred to as the Bible boy at school and frequently pretended to preach in front of mock audiences in his bedroom or backyard. He was a target of teasing because of his noticeable lisp, which demonstrated his amazing determination. A lot of people thought he would never be able to preach well. However, Thomas did not allow their skepticism to define him. He practiced a lot, even utilizing everyday objects as props and studying the preachers he respected. Everyone around him could see how passionate he was, and his perseverance gradually transformed a weakness into a strength that would enable him to fulfill his mission. When he was 10 years old, his father's kidney failure diagnosis completely upended his world. Thomas and Sarita had to deal with even more difficulties when the plant closed in 1982. When there was employment available, he occasionally plowed ditches for his brother for $100 a day. The family took turns paying their utility bills, and at periods when they were without running water or electricity, they had to rely on candles and bottled water from family members. Thomas never gave up on his vocation in spite of these difficulties. He clung tenaciously to his beliefs and future vision, preaching wherever he could. Despite these obstacles, Thomas continued his schooling. Years before, he had left West Virginia State University to take care of his father, but he was determined to continue his education. He graduated from France International Christian University in 1985 with a Master of Arts degree in Biblical Studies. He obtained a master's degree in Biblical Studies in 1990 and a doctorate in ministry in 1995. He led his expanding church, took on odd jobs, and raised a family while juggling these degrees through correspondence and distance learning. Because of his unconventional academic trajectory, some detractors questioned the institution's reputation and referred to it as a credential factory. At the age of 25 TD, Jake was appointed pastor of Smithers, West Virginia's Greater Emmanuel Temple of Faith, in 1982. There were just 10 members of the little storefront church, so few that they could have fit in one car. The beginning seemed uneventful at first. Jake's experience, however, was everything from typical. He had already faced difficult obstacles. Jake had worked at the Union Carbide plant to support his family until it closed, leaving him jobless and forcing him into full-time ministry. His father had died in 1973 following a protracted illness. Early years were characterized by financial hardship. He and his spouse, Sarita, put up a lot of effort to maintain the ministry. To help them out, Sarita even got a night shift as a DJ at a Christian radio station. Jake was noticeable from the beginning. He had been known as Bible Youngster as a youngster because he had preached to made-up congregations. Despite this traumatic history, Sarita was profoundly touched by Thomas's impassioned sermons during his visit to her church. There was an instant connection between them. Sarita, who was described as captivated, was aware that she had found someone exceptional. After only 6 months of dating, they were married, starting a relationship that would grow to be essential to one of America's most powerful ministries. From in the beginning, their marriage was everything from simple to provide for their little family. Sarita was a disc jockey at a Christian radio station at night. 6 months after their wedding, they were in a horrific vehicle accident that left Sarita with serious damage to her legs and feet, while Thomas concentrated on expanding his ministry. Despite the doctor's doubts that she would ever be able to walk again, Thomas gave her unwavering care and supported her as she gradually recovered. She eventually recovered the ability to walk, and their relationship became even closer. After serving as the executive director of women's ministries at the Potter's House and going on to become a published author, Sarita eventually rose to prominence as a leader in her own right. They have now been married for over 40 years, founded on common sacrifice, dedication, and faith. Thomas established the Temple of Faith Church in Montgomery, West Virginia, in 1980 when he was just 23 years old. The congregation began in a tiny storefront setting with just 10 members. Given that many people questioned his ability to succeed due to his speech impairment, it was a bold step for a young preacher with little funding. Early on, there were many financial difficulties. In order to purchase groceries, he and Sarita occasionally had to gather and return bottles. However, as the community expanded, it relocated to Smithers, South Charleston, and Cross Lanes before settling in Dallas. There, it developed into the Potter's House, a massive church with around 30,000 congregants. What started off as a small shop has expanded into one of America's biggest churches. Long days of arduous work were interspersed with Thomas's ministry during those years. To help pay the expenses, he worked at the Union Carbide chemical plant in West Virginia. He was worn out but resolute from his hazardous career handling chemicals used in mining and welding. Thomas and Sarita had to deal with even more difficulties when the plant closed in 1982. When there was employment available, he occasionally plowed ditches for his brother for $100 a day. The family took turns paying their utility bills, and at periods when they were without running water or electricity, they had to rely on candles and bottled water from family members. Thomas never gave up on his vocation in spite of these difficulties. He clung tenaciously to his beliefs and future vision, preaching wherever he could. Despite these obstacles, Thomas continued his schooling. Years before, he had left West Virginia State University to take care of his father, but he was determined to continue his education. He graduated from Friends International Christian University in 1985 with a Master of Arts degree in Biblical Studies. He obtained a master's degree in Biblical Studies in 1990 and a doctorate in ministry in 1995. He led his expanding church, took on odd jobs, and raised a family while juggling these degrees through correspondence and distance learning. Because of his unconventional academic trajectory, some detractors questioned the institution's reputation and referred to it as a credential factory. At the age of 25 TD, Jake was appointed pastor of Smithers, West Virginia's Greater Emmanuel Temple of Faith in 1982. There were just 10 members of the little storefront church, so few that they could have fit in one car. The beginning seemed uneventful at first. Jake's experience, however, was everything from typical. He had already faced difficult obstacles. Jake had worked at the Union Carbide plant to support his family until it closed, leaving him jobless and forcing him into full-time ministry. His father had died in 1973 following a protracted illness. Early years were characterized by financial hardship. He and his spouse, Sarita, put up a lot of effort to maintain the ministry. To help them out, Sarita even got a night shift as a DJ at a Christian radio station. Jake was noticeable from the beginning. He had been known as Bible Youngster as a youngster because he had preached to made-up congregations. Since 1976, he had been preaching Now, however, there was actual accountability. It was no coincidence that the chapel was situated in a town known for its coal mines. Jake thought that a location that most people ignore had promise. His first conference, Back to the Bible, was conducted in 1983, a year after he was appointed pastor. There were 80 attendees, a significant increase from the initial 10 members. It was an early indication of his capacity to motivate and captivate others in spite of his low means. He also started a radio ministry called Back to the Bible in the same year. The cost of a 30-inch slot was $45 that the church could hardly afford. However, Jake recognized the influence of the media. His empathetic and pragmatic messages struck a chord with listeners right away. He became a local celebrity as a result of the program, which also attracted new members to the congregation. His voice on the radio became a lifeline for many people in isolated coal mining villages. His impact was growing rapidly, as evidenced by the fact that by the end of 1983, 80 people had attended his conference. Jake was ordained as a bishop by doctor in 1987 at the age of 30. Greater Emmanuel Church's presiding bishop is Quander L. Wilson. The ceremony, which took place at Charleston, West Virginia's Civic Center, was a significant turning point. It was uncommon for someone so young to become a bishop. He was able to supervise more than just his local congregation thanks to the title, which led to additional chances and notoriety. His vision and leadership had obviously already had an effect. By 1988, Jake understood that in order to grow even more, he needed more support. In that year, he became a member of the Pentecostal group known as Higher Ground Always Abundant Assemblies, which was established in Columbus, Ohio, by Bishop Sherman Watkins. Watkins recognized his potential and took on the role of father figure and mentor in the ministry. The assemblies had started out with just 11 members in 1970, but had since expanded, and Jake's vision aligned perfectly with the organization's goal of connecting ordinary people with remarkable saviors. As his ministry grew, this relationship provided him both resources and credibility. Jake relocated his congregation from Smithers, West Virginia, to South Charleston in 1990. By that time, there were perhaps 100 people in his congregation. The number swiftly doubled and then tripled after the transfer, reaching 300. He had a talent for relating to those who were battling addiction, homelessness, and dysfunctional families. His church turned into a heaven for those seeking hope. He moved once more in 1993, this time to the more affluent area of Cross Lanes. For a black preacher at the time, it was a daring decision, but Jake's message transcended social and racial divides. The group quickly expanded to over 1,000 members, with an astounding 40% of them being Caucasian, a rarity among Pentecostal congregations. Jake made his television debut in the same year. His weekly show, The Potter's Touch, debuted on Trinity Broadcasting Network in 1993. The impact was instantaneous and astounding. Millions of people watched his sermons in less than a year, and his name spread throughout the nation. In order to cope with the tremendous expansion, he moved his family and ministry to Dallas, Texas. By 1996, his programs quickly established themselves as a mainstay of religious television, reaching over 100 nations. To reach even more African Americans, he also collaborated with Black Entertainment Television in 1994. These shows were created to meet the community's unique cultural and spiritual requirements. As opposed to repeating his TBN talks, they discussed economic empowerment, overcoming adversity, and self-worth. With millions of people watching from the US, the Caribbean, Africa, and certain areas of Europe, the collaboration soon made Jake a household name in African American homes. He established the Manpower Conference in Detroit, Michigan, that same year. Thousands of men attended the event, which provided a secure forum for talking about issues like addiction, marriage, and fatherhood. It developed become one of the nation's most influential men's conventions. Since its inception, more than 150,000 lives have been changed, and by 2011, over 9,000 men were attending a single event in Dallas. Jake established TDJ Enterprises in 1995, broadening his ministry to include digital media, music, film, and publishing. With the sale of more than 20 million copies of his novels and the production of successful movies like Woman Thou Art Loose 2004, Jumping the Broom 2011, and Heaven is for Real 2014, the firm would eventually bring in close to $400 million. Jake's vision extended beyond the pulpit, as seen by the company's establishment of Clay Academy, a charter school, and its funding of the $150 million Capella Park real estate development in Dallas. He presented Get Ready, a nationally syndicated show that aired on TBN and BET and reached millions of viewers. From 1995 to 1996, preaching was interspersed with music, live call-ins, and candid discussions about urgent problems including addiction, domestic abuse, and financial difficulties. Jake took his biggest risk to yet in 1996. In order to establish the Potter's House, he moved to Dallas from West Virginia with 50 church workers and their families. The 34-acre new campus included a 5,000-seat auditorium. More than 2,000 people attended the first service. Because of the tremendous reaction, the church constructed a new sanctuary in August 2000 that was 191,000 square feet and could accommodate 7,600 people. The $45 million project was remarkably paid off in just 4 years. The Potter's House was one of the biggest and most significant churches in America by the early 2000s, with over 30,000 members, with satellite campuses in Fort Worth, Frisco, Denver, and Los Angeles. Its influence went well beyond Dallas. Up to 70,000 individuals watched services online on any given Sunday, while over 16,000 people came in person, with an ethnic mix that comprised people from all walks of life and a membership that was 45% male. The church was remarkably diversified. One of the worst humanitarian disasters in contemporary American history was caused by Hurricane Katrina, which devastated the Gulf Coast in September 2005. Millions of people were left homeless, and over 1,333 people lost their lives. When its levees failed and entire neighborhoods were flooded, the city of New Orleans was particularly heavily struck. Bishop T.D. Jake Jakes emerged as a key voice of hope throughout this turmoil. He appeared next to President George W. Bush in Baker, Louisiana, on September 5, 2005. In public, Bush hailed Jake as a leader of what he dubbed the Army of Compassion and commended him for encouraging church families to adopt displaced survivors. Jake demonstrated that he was prepared to utilize his power to demand substantive change by pressing the president to take poverty more seriously. Jake became more than just a preacher at this point. When the nation most needed it, he was able to rally people and resources as an advisor with unique access to national power. Jake made history again on January 20, 2009. Just a few years later. That morning, Jake joined other pastors for a private prayer session at St. John's Episcopal Church in Washington, D.C., a custom that dates back to 1933, as Barack Obama readied himself to take the oath as the first African American president of the United States. Jake joined evangelical pastor Joel Hunter and the church's rector Luis Leon in praying for the country and the incoming president. His presence at the highest level of government represented the power and acceptance of African American religious leadership. Rick Warren gave the invocation during the public swearing-in later that day. Jake's prayer in the morning, however, had its own weight. Jake decided to emphasize harmony and hope despite criticism of the selection of some of the pastors participating in the service. Jake was a spiritual leader who was also devoted to resolving social and economic issues, solidifying his position as a national faith leader who could be relied upon at the most important times. He established the nonprofit Metroplex Economic Development Corporation in 1998 with the goal of bridging opportunity gaps for urban neighborhoods. By arranging youth mentorship programs and house ownership seminars, the organization assisted hundreds of families in moving toward financial stability. In addition, Jake established the Clay Academy in the Capella Park neighborhood, a school that offers kids both academic courses and worthwhile extracurricular activities. He had a clear vision. His goal was to end poverty cycles while maintaining his commitment to religious principles. Families that frequently felt ignored were given hope by these initiatives, which also strengthened neighborhoods and produced jobs. Jake simultaneously tapped into the media industry in addition to the church. He collaborated on a syndicated chat show in 2009 with Jay McGraw, Dr. Phil McGraw, and CBS television distribution. The plan was to use daytime TV's broad audience and his motivating manner. Despite having strong support, the project was shelved before it could air due to shifting television industry objectives and economic difficulties. For Jake, it served as a stark reminder of how hard it is for a pastor, regardless of fame, to make it in the mainstream entertainment industry. Unfazed, Jake made another attempt in 2015. 4 cities, Atlanta, Cleveland, Dallas, and Minneapolis, tested the TD Jake Talk program, and the results were favorable. It had spread to over 50 markets nationwide by September 12, 2016. The program featured celebrity interviews, self-help tips, human interest tales, and faith-based encouragement. However, while having compelling material, it found it difficult to differentiate itself in the saturated market for daytime television. Tegna declared on March 15, 2017, that the show would be canceled after one season due to low ratings and few clearances. Nevertheless, Jake's voice found a home on the Oprah Winfrey Network, where fans continued to see his motivational programming. Jake never lost sight of his ministry and family, even if his television endeavors demonstrated the difficulties of breaking into new markets. He reared 5 kids with his wife, Sarita, Jamar, Thomas Jr., Jermaine, Sarah, and Cora. While this is uncommon in McGurch families, all 5 were heavily committed in ministry. While their brothers worked in outreach, media, and church operations, Sarah and Cora became well-known preachers and writers. Together, they aided in the expansion of Potter's House into a ministry that now serves over 30 people through more than 50 programs, ranging from literacy instruction to outreach to the homeless and international humanitarian efforts. The Jake family's strength demonstrated how togetherness, faith, and fortitude can preserve a legacy for many generations. pastort.d, Jake Jakes, was connected to a federal case against music mogul Shah Diddy Combs at the beginning of 2024. Combs was charged with sexual harassment, drug use, and sex trafficking in the lawsuit brought by producer Rodney Lil Rod Jones. Although Jake was not a defendant, the file did contain his name. Jones asserted that following Cassie Ventura's accusations of rape and abuse, Combs sought to improve his public image through his relationship with Jake. Just one mention was sufficient to generate online discussion, queries, and headlines. Jake was never charged with any misconduct. However, the connection demonstrated how a famous figure may face genuine difficulties if they had even a passing connection to a significant issue. Jake was embroiled in even more significant scandal later that year. Pennsylvania clergyman and convicted sex offender Dwayne Youngblood made an appearance on the YouTube chat show Larry Reed Live in October 2024. In the 1980s, when he was 18 or 19, Jake allegedly tried to kiss him and embrace him without his permission. In 2008 and 2014, respectively, Youngblood was found guilty of sexually assaulting a minor and corrupting minors. Jakes received a letter from his lawyer requesting $6 million to prevent a lawsuit around the same time as the interview. Jake's legal team vehemently refuted the accusations, claiming that they were the result of a campaign of deception and citing Youngblood's criminal history as proof of his untrustworthiness. Online, the statements immediately attracted attention, with many people doubting Youngblood's intentions. On 25 November 2024, Jakes took a risk. He sued Youngblood and unidentified others in federal court for slander. According to the lawsuit, they planned a deliberate attempt to harm his name and demand millions of dollars from him. According to Jake's attorneys, the accusations had a very negative impact on his physical, mental, and spiritual well-being, even resulting in a medical crisis during his sermons. According to the petition, the charges were wholly untrue and driven by avarice in an attempt to capitalize on Jake's reputation and power. Jake saw the lawsuit as a means of retaliation and defense of his ministry and reputation. Jake had suffered a scary health scare on November 24, 2024, just one day beforehand. The 67-year-old abruptly started to shake and lowered his microphone while preaching at the Potter's house in Dallas. As churchgoers and staff hurried to his aid, he sagged on his stool. The film of the live broadcast of the service swiftly went viral around the world, capturing the turmoil and intensity of the situation. It was a big heart attack that was initially reported as a health issue. When Jake got to the hospital, the doctors informed him that he was only 5 minutes away from death. He would not have lived if he had been delayed. Jake had been preaching with barely half of his heart working, according to medical examinations. The blood supply to the right side had been totally cut off due to a blockage. Until he sat down, the adrenaline of preaching had obscured the seriousness of his situation. He further clarified that the realization of his body shutting down hit him as soon as he dropped his microphone. According to medical professionals, if treatment is delayed, this kind of blockage frequently results in death. Jake claimed that he was oblivious to the mayhem around him as he fell, feeling as though he had drifted into a serene, white cloud-like environment. He characterized it as a serene, near-death encounter that altered his outlook on faith and life. The lack of typical symptoms added to the episode's unsettling nature. He never experienced numbness or a strong ache in his chest. Rather, he simply had the impression that he was falling asleep. In retrospect, he described it as a silent heart attack that almost killed him without any prior warning. Jake's next significant choice was influenced by the near miss. He declared a historic chaver on April 27, 2025, in front of tens of thousands of people at the Potter's house. Later that year, he announced that Sarah Jake Roberts, his daughter, and her husband, T. Roberts, would take over as senior pastors. Since Jake started the church in 1996, it has amassed over 30,000 members and a sizable online following. After his health crisis, Jake claimed he could not afford to leave his congregation without a leader in case he passed away. As chairman of the board and spiritual supervisor, he pledged to continue preaching and leading the church, referring to the event as a rebirth rather than a departure. Jake stated unequivocally that he would not be leaving the ministry. He stated that he will broaden his audience by taking on new endeavors, such as the My Next Chapter podcast series that he will be producing with iHeart Podcasts. He clarified that he wanted to continue changing lives all across the world while making sure his church remained resilient under new leadership. This is an expansion, not an ending, he said to his church.